Okay, so we've been talking about the cool season grasses. Now we're going to shift focus and talk about what we call the warm season grasses. Now, the warm season grasses engage in the C4 photosynthesis that we've discussed before, and that emerged about 35 million years ago. The primary center of origin for the warm season grasses is believed to be what was Gondwana and now Africa. These grasses developed in the warm, and the reason why we call them warm season grasses is because they have their optimum growth during the warmer parts of the year. When the temperatures are cold, then they tend not to grow very well. These grasses developed and diverged in what is now referred to as a savanna ecosystem. So this is characterized by wet periods and then long dry periods with high temperatures. The grasses are believed to have migrated from this African area of Gondwana to South America, Asia, and Australia. And that's mostly via what is now Antarctica, before Antarctica was at the bottom of the earth during the continental separations. As we said, these grasses are adapted to warm, hot, tropical conditions. And because of this, when it does get cold, they go into dormancy. And they have a dormancy mechanism that completely shuts them down. They often turn brown and die. The above ground biomass dies off and degrades and then results in a new flush of growth in the spring when temperatures warm again. The first grass that we're going to talk about that's a warm season grass that we use today as turf grasses are the Bermuda grasses. These are probably the most widespread warm season grasses that we use in the world today. And the genus name is Cynodon or Cynodon. The Bermuda grasses are found in hot, sunny areas. They originally developed in subtropical Africa, again in that savanna ecosystem. There's two basic species that we use today as modern Bermuda grasses. What we call common Bermuda grass, or Cynodon dactylon, which is characterized by deep roots, a broad lateral growth, which was the result of being adapted to a grazing and savanna ecosystem. There's another grass that we call African Bermuda grass, or C. transvalensis, which was developed in what is now South Africa and diverged in that area. And we use this grass in a hybrid with Cynodon dactylon that results in a sterile hybrid that we call hybrid Bermuda grass. Most of the varieties that we use today in turf grass areas tend to be hybridized varieties of C. transvalensis and C. dactylon. There are also some seeded common types that are gaining popularity mostly because of the desirability to transport seed rather than large volumes of stolons that are required with the hybrid Bermuda grasses that are sterile, so they don't produce seed. So the seeded varieties of common Bermuda grass are gaining popularity and are becoming more prevalent today. The zoysia grasses, or zoysia for the genus name, its primary center of origin is the warm, wet, tropical areas of southeast China. So if we think about that area, it's a very tropical, warm, wet kind of jungle environment. And we have three basic grasses that are used as turf grasses: Japanese zoysia grass, or Zoysia japonica, Manila grass, or Zoysia matrella, and mascarene grass, or Zoysia tenuifolia. This is also sometimes seen as Zoysia pacifica. The primary grasses used in North America for turf grass are Japanese and Manila grass. Zoysia japonica being used more broadly, and Zoysia matrella being used more narrowly, particularly on golf course fairways and tees as you move farther south in the southeastern U.S. These grasses developed and diverged in southeast China under hot, wet, and cloudy conditions. So if we think about what those conditions are like in southeast China, over the course of the year, we have a monsoon period that's very cloudy, very wet, but also very hot and humid. Just a nasty, hot, wet environment to grow in. And then we have a dry period of more open skies, but still very hot and tropical, hot and humid. What results from this is that these grasses tend to have a short root system, but they also have some shade tolerance that's generally better than the Bermuda grasses that we discussed earlier, the Synodon grasses. One of the other interesting things about zoysia grass is that they tend to have a high silica content. This makes it difficult in modern times for grasses to be mown cleanly, requires very sharp blades and requires maintenance mechanics to maintain those blades at a very high degree of sharpness in order to obtain a very clean cut. But it's believed that this high silica content was a grazing avoidance mechanism that made zoysia grasses less palatable to grazing animals and caused them to avoid zoysia grasses and select other grasses for grazing. St. Augustine grass is a grass that we use today. Its genus is Stenotaphyrum. There's only one turf grass species that we use, which is Stenotaphyrum secundatum, and it's believed that its primary origin was in southeast coastal Africa, which then migrated to South America as the continents diverged, and then into the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. What's interesting is that these grasses, as it was believed to have developed in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico over islands, that the inflorescence or the seed head of St. Augustine grass is very well adapted to floating. And so it's very clear from that this grass engaged in what we talked about earlier in previous lectures about island hopping. So moving from one island to the next and then diverging on that island. St. Augustine grass tends to be a very coarse grass. Predominantly wet areas. It thrives in wetter soils. It's a relatively high nitrogen requirement for as warm season grasses go, but it is a grass that is used extensively, particularly in the southern United States, for lawns and other areas where it can be mown at a higher height of cut. It doesn't tolerate low mowing, but it's a grass that is used extensively as a turf grass in the U.S. Another grass is centipede grass, or Aremacloa. There's again only one turf species, as there is for many of these warm season grasses. That's Aremacloa ophiorides. And it was originally diverged from Africa, then moved to India, and then Asia, and then Southeast China and Polynesia. Interestingly, this grass has short roots, kind of like zoysia grasses. So if we think about some commonalities there, zoysia grass was in southeast China originally, and so was centipede grass. We find under those conditions of cloudy, hot, wet, tropical conditions, we find a short-rooted plant with low nitrogen requirement, and again, as compared to St. Augustine grass with a higher nitrogen requirement, centipede, much lower nitrogen requirements, often referred to as lazy man's grass, because the more management that one does to it, it tends to look worse. So leaving it alone and letting it grow tends to make it look better. Also interestingly, zoysia grass shares these two characteristics, which is indicative of the fact that they both developed and evolved in the same general area of the world. So the next two grasses that we're going to talk about are seashore paspalum, which is the paspalum genus. It's a very broad genus, lots of different species, but there's only one turf grass species, and that's Paspalum vaginatum, or seashore paspalum. Again, Southeast Africa, kind of in the wet, moist, tropical regions of Southeast Africa, coastal South America, predominantly in salt marshes. What's interesting about this grass is, as you might think, seashore being in the name, this salt marsh area where these grasses are normally found in their native range results in a salt tolerance. And in fact, these grasses can tolerate very salty soils, which allows them to be established on areas that most grasses wouldn't normally establish on. Carpet grass, or Exonopus, is another species of turf grass that we use. Two turf species here, Exonopus affinis, or common carpet grass, and Exonopus compressus, or tropical carpet grass. Again, this grass developed in the same general area as seashore paspalum in the area of Brazil and South America, and then the coastal regions of Southeast Africa. It's believed that the tropical variety, Axanopus compressus, moved to Asia and migrated to Asia. The common type migrated to the Caribbean and to Southeast North America. It's believed that carpet grass in the Southeast North America and Gulf of Mexico area is a naturalized or native species. It's found generally in open, wet, and warm areas of the world, and this is indicative of where its center of origin was found in the Brazil and South America, as well as Africa areas of coastal Africa. Now, the last three grasses that we're going to talk about are somewhat unique. They're found in a pretty specialized area of the world, and that is the Great Plains of North America. Buffalo grass, or Bucloides dactyloides, is a C4 grass, but what's interesting about buffalo grass is that it has a very broad range of adaptation that allows it to grow anywhere from Mexico all the way up into Canada. So as opposed to most C4 grasses, it tolerates cold, freezing conditions pretty readily. It's relatively recent in terms of its emergence and divergence and development, and it was originally believed that its center of origin is in Mexico and then moved to the Great Plains in North America. It likes a semi-arid condition with wet periods and then long dry periods. It has a diverse temperature tolerance, as we talked about. But because of these characteristics, it tends to form an more open canopy, and so it has limited turf grass use. More often you see this grass used in out-of-play areas of golf courses and parks. You might see it used in lawns in the Great Plains area, but these are generally used in low-maintenance areas, low-maintenance lawns, highway roadsides, rights-of-way, etc. Grama grass, or the Butilloas, are also C4 grasses, generally not turf grasses, but are found as a major component of the shortgrass prairie, mostly because they grow fairly short. Again, center of origin in northern Mexico and then movement to the Great Plains of North America. The two main species that we see are blue grama grass and side oats grama grass. And these are used in prairie areas, and so you'll often find these grasses in areas that are out of play, but close to golf courses, maybe in parks areas where there's low maintenance areas, and then also in highway roadsides and rights of way. Wheatgrass is a species of grass. Interestingly, it's a C3, so technically it's not a warm season grass, but it's related to these other two in terms of where it's found, so I included it here. And that's the agropyrons. Not turf grasses, but a major component of what is called the tall grass prairie. These are grasses like big blue stem and wheatgrass, where grasses grew maybe 8, 10, 12 feet tall. It's likely that this grass migrated over the Bering Land Bridge into the northern Great Plains area, over the mountains, the Rockies, and so on down through Canada and into the Great Plains region. So these are three grasses that are kind of unique to the Great Plains region, but are used in some cases in kind of related areas, close to turf grass areas, and in buffalo grass's case, is used as a limited turf grass in some cases. So that's the warm season grasses and some of our more unique grasses. And that completes kind of our discussion of where these grasses come from and what they're all about, so that we can start talking about how they're used in specific use areas as we move forward in the semester. So that's what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks and months, is talking about how these grasses, both warm and cool season grasses, are used and how they've been developed for use in our turf grass areas that we see today.